materials. And the current Irish education, so this is my rationale for trying to study this. So examinations place emphasis on relaying facts and their short-term memory. In schools, mostly practicals are given less time, resources, and focus in school. It's kind of like at the end of the chapter, the teacher would go through and maybe do the experiments that are required or mandatory for biology or ag science students to have. Investigation are step-by-step lists for students, so students are critically thinking, they're not problem solving, they're not coming up with the variables in their experiments. So there's some current changes to the Irish education system, in particular with the NCCA in 2019. They had a lot of reports done from the SEC. There's greater focus on student scientific literacy, as it was showing that students only had a surface level understanding, so it was requiring them to have a deeper understanding. The STEM improving problem solving, teamwork, inquiry-based learning. So students weren't showing problem solving, teamwork, and inquiry-based learning skills as they should be in comparison to other international countries. They're trying to find a greater balance between their propositional, which is their knowledge, their cognitive, and their procedural knowledge. So how do they have the skills? Do they have the background information to carry out these investigations? So with that, I came up with my research question. So can the integration of inquiry-based investigation and trivial questioning enrich students' understanding? So I emerged from the United States that they were talking about, based on the NGS framework, they came up with three-dimensional learning, which it takes the core concepts, the scientific engineering practices, and finally the cross-cutting concepts and science topics across physics, chemistry, biology, and nature of science or the earth and science. It's implemented by investigating questions, so which is the inquiry-based investigations, which I'll discuss in a moment. It can be constructing modules, engaging in debates, trivial problem questions. So for my investigation or my intervention, I was particularly looking at guided inquiry-based investigations. So the students were given a research question and they were given a class of background information where the students had to generate their hypothesis, the experiment, their materials, the method, results, and discussion points. There was teacher and peer formative feedback between the groups and peers. And then at the end, when all the results and the students had written up their reports, they could get involved in the class discussion. Okay, so I was, during placement, was 10 weeks with the students, TY students. I conducted 2 cycles. The first cycle involved 15 traditional year students. It was over a 2-week time frame. They were getting involved in agricultural science topics, osmosis and photosynthesis. And similarly, the cycle 2 had also the 15 transition students, and it was over 1.5 weeks, and instead they were looking at the physical properties of soil. And for my data collection methods, I had 4. I had my critical incident questionnaires, reflective journal, my focus group questions, and my 3DL questions. So these questionnaires gave formative feedback from students. So this is my qualitative analysis where I had to go through and do a thematic analysis and coding. Reflective journal, that was from my point of view. So I was observing the students, and on a 1 to 4 scale, 4 being exceptional and 1 being moderate, I kind of graded them or decided if they were showing engagement, were they problem solving. I had 6 different topics where I was looking at, and then 3DL questions. There was maybe 6 questions that they were asked after they've done the inquiry-based investigation, where it was asking students to rationalize, critically think, and problem solve questions to do with the experiments. And then finally, the focus group involved 4 students out of the class, and they were discussing how effective they found the inquiry-based investigations in comparison to more traditional, where their students were given the instructions instead of them coming up them with themselves. From my thematic analysis, from my qualitative and quantitative data analysis, there was 3 main themes that I came up with. Was the uncertainty around inquiry-based investigations. Secondly was the interactions during the inquiry-based investigation, and then there was the scientific understanding. So uncertainty around investigations, there was a difficulty at the start for writing up the inquiry-based investigations, and this was outlined in my cycle 1, where I found that students were struggling kind of answering the questions and maybe needed more time on background information. Students found it time consuming instead of them handing out the investigation instructions that they had to come up with it, that they were spending a lot of time researching it themselves, coming up with the method, everything. So you have to think it from a science teacher point of view, that is it worth it? Is it worth it giving extra time to students to develop these problem solving critical and having a deeper understanding? Students got to work with others, so it was through their peer work, their class discussions. So they found that these interactions helped them to think outside the box, to hear other opinions. Student engagement, there was a lot of students that were normally didn't really get involved, they couldn't really understand the topics, and this gave them an opportunity to have a hands-on approach instead of just passively listen in class, where instead they actually got to work in the lab by themselves and with their peers. Scientific misconceptions, this allowed me to, as a teacher, to find out if there was any sections of a topic that students couldn't understand. I could ask them questions, I could maybe, following on the investigation, get them to study it more, get them to practice doing the investigation again. And then it allowed them to challenge cognitively, as they had to research the topic, come up with the method and instructions themselves. So they had to research. From the student feedback, students found that from the investigations, inquiry-based investigations, that they were asking other people questions and doing class discussions were helpful and affirming for their learning. They preferred inquiry-based investigation compared to traditional style of experimentation when given method. Inquiry-based investigation require more thinking and problem solving to be done, as they were more interactive classes and had a deeper understanding. These were sourced from their critical analysis of questionnaires, the focus group questions, and the rubric. For the theme engagement, for my reflective journal, in the lesson 2 for my second cycle, problem solving and level of engagement and questioning and discussing increased to exceptional compared to only given a rate of 3, it jumped to a 4. So students, as time progressed, as they got more used of inquiry-based investigations, they were more able to problem solve, to critically analysis work that they were doing. Some benefits is student engagement was increased, they're working with others, so their communication skills were developed, they were challenged cognitively, so they were developing critical and problem solving skills. Scientific misconceptions were identified for teachers. Challenges were uncertainty around investigation, so time is given more. And then it was time consuming. It did involve a lot of, preliminary conclusions, student engagement in scientific literacy was increased. Deeper understanding of agricultural science topics acquired through these investigations. Student questioning and involvement in class discussion allowed sharing of formative feedback, which was peer and teacher formative feedback. It does take time for students to become more comfortable students were a lot maybe shyer compared to some of them that were really energetic, enthusiastic about the inquiry-based investigation. So just giving them praise when they did something helped them to become more comfortable and more confident in their own opinion when it came to sharing ideas for their methods. Preliminary recommendations is to build up the level inquiry. I started off with a guided. To move up to open, it would require a lot of experience on the students, so they weren't given the research question. Depending on the school culture, trying to implement inquiry-based investigation as part of learning may be difficult if, say, academic was relied on instead of developing these skills. If they were just trying to get them to do well in examinations, to get them to just relay facts, maybe it's difficult. Thank you for listening.